Hello folks, Y Guy here again. Sorry for my casual dress here, but I'm out in almost 100-degree temperatures in this wonderful July day. Also, you may hear, as I've said in previous videos, a little rumble of the wind, and I got a mister going here off to my left, and so I hope too many water droplets don't fall on this lens. This video is called The Y Guy and History Repeating Itself. Okay? Now when I research a topic, I use a scalpel technique when I'm doing my research, meaning I consider quite a bit, okay, in my research. I try to remain humble or teachable and open. You've got to try to do that if you're going to be objective, right? And then I look into history of what I'm researching and where did it come from, who's saying what about what, you know, and that includes historians and things like that. And I look at culture, which also requires a little bit of knowledge of history. And how much do the historians agree, disagree? I consider all those things. The character of people, we're all the same. I don't care how much time has passed. Okay, sure. When I say all the same, what I'm meaning is there is more similarity between all of us, the peoples of the world, than there are differences, really, when you get down to it. Okay, just the character of people. In general, what I'm saying is common sense. Okay, I apply that because I'm a people watcher and I observe people. And the most important consideration I do when I do research for these videos is I have to ask myself about the character of God. Does this research endorse God's character, or does it slander His character? What people are saying while I'm researching, how does it address God's character? That's the main foundation of all my research. And it's simplistic, I got to admit, because God, He's the one that said He's love, and God, He's the one that said He is good. As an example of a good tree versus a bad tree, Jesus pointed that out. He said that a good tree cannot produce bad fruit and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So if that's the truth, which I'm assuming it is, as I've said in a previous video, is God a good tree or a bad tree? God is a good tree. He can only produce good fruit. He can't produce bad fruit. As an example of what I'm talking about, I've mentioned in a previous video, the Y Guy asks, what is the lake of fire? I pointed out that this process of the lake of fire is good fruit. It's got to be good. Why? Because the God of love, a good God, is the one who created it. So you're going to have to get that video, look at that video if you want to get in depth with that, but I'm just using that as an example. Now when I present a topic to my viewers, I don't use a scalpel because it ends up becoming white noise. You know, if I pointed out every little cross T and every little dotted I, every little tiny scripture I've ever seen and used and researched, and the author, the historians, and oh man, because I spent hours and hours of research to do a simple 10 or 15 minute video. So naturally that would be terrible for you as the viewer. So whenever I present a topic, I use a broadsword rather than a little scalpel, okay? And the reason I do that is because I simply want to plant a seed of doubt in the hearts and the minds of my viewers so that they will maybe become hungry and research stuff for themselves. Remember, study, show yourself approved. Too many of the religious folks, and Christians especially, are too busy being spoon-fed and letting other people doing the studying and trying to prove their point. Anyway, you get the point. Now, I could easily go into scripture wars with people, and I find that unproductive because, frankly, people who do the scripture wars, their minds are already made up. They're not teachable whatsoever, myself included. And again, all it does is produce a bunch of a bunch of white noise. It's just useless. Well, I have a question now into this video, the Y Guy and History Repeating Itself. Has the church history, okay, endorsed the true character of God? You have to go back to church history and know a little bit about the church history. Now, who was involved in this church history, the beginning? now when I say church history, I'm talking the Christian religion at this point, who was involved in church history, and what was their character like. It's important. If they're the ones who wrote some of the history and promoted what they believed, and historically we then believe what they believed, isn't it important to know a little bit about their character of these people? Now, I'm not going to get into that in this video because I've already mentioned a few character aspects of some of the early church leaders like Augustine, Tertullian, Jerome, Origen, and you know, there's quite a few actually. And I have read and I have shared on videos actual quotes from these people, okay, in their own hand. So you got to know a little bit about their character. Now, has the things that they wrote and things that they promoted, has it actually endorsed the true character of God? You've got to ask yourself that. It hasn't most of the time, okay? That's the point. And some people within the religious church circles will say, well, they were just the minority. Well, there's a problem with that kind of thinking, okay? First off, you don't know that, and neither do I. I personally think that they were the majority. Why? Because our Bibles came out of that. So anyway, let me continue with this. Were they the minority? Well, who said it only takes a little leaven, a minority of leaven, to leaven the whole loaf? Okay, let's label a loaf the Bible. Okay, it only takes a little leaven. Now, all people like myself are trying to do is point out the leaven. That's all we're trying to do. Yes, the vast majority of it is still digestible. Okay, the vast majority of it is wonderful and it tastes good, but there's still leaven in there. And there's a little leaven in there, and it has leavened the whole loaf. Christianity in itself, it only takes a little leaven to leaven the whole loaf. Christianity is full of leaven, full of doctrines of men, full of traditions of men. Okay? Now, some of the leaven that was used in church history, okay, at the beginning by these guys who later on, because of their teaching, we got our Bibles, and how we got our Bibles, I should say. The early church leaders, they would purposely, and I'm saying this purposely because of some of the things they wrote in their memoirs, they would purposely keep people in ignorance. They would keep people in fear. They'd keep people in bondage. Why would they do that? To control them, to manipulate them. Gee, I wonder if that's still going on today. Remember, the title is this, History Repeating Itself. The vast majority of people in the past couldn't read and write. Did they promote schools to teach all of their patronage, the folks came to their services, their masses, and what have you? Did they offer schools to teach them how to read and write? Did they distribute Bibles to these people? They did absolutely the opposite, and history tells you that. Okay? They would promote, speaking of the character of God, they promote an angry God. If you didn't do what the clergy said, you didn't believe the way the clergy believed, for 1,000 years they went out and tortured people, and burned them at the stake, and did all sorts of things. Okay, you just have to know a little bit about the Dark Ages. And during the Dark Ages, as I've said in previous videos, is when our Bibles were published. The first Latin Vulgate in 440 AD. So most of you know that already, okay? And they would use the fear tactic because you must believe the way we believe as a clergyman, okay, or as a priest, or as a preacher, a pastor. You must believe the way we believe, or else. And they would leave hell hanging over people's heads. It was to their benefit, okay, to teach this way and to teach this method of fear and bondage. And you're telling me that it wasn't all about this here, all about the money? Then why would they sell forgiveness? That's part of church history, folks. They would sell forgiveness. If you're a wealthy person, you can get away with more. Why? Because you could buy forgiveness. Okay, it's part of history. All right, and I'm just barely hitting on this stuff because I want to try to keep this video short. Now, the church today, okay, let's look at the church today, is using the same name of God that they were back then, where that little leaven, okay, was first introduced. They're using the same tactics. How can you say that, white guy? They're still using fear-based doctrines. Most clergymen are afraid of losing their jobs if they stray from doctrines of men and traditions of men. Okay, so they're going to keep promoting that so they can keep that coming in. Okay, and that's not the total motive. Believe me, I feel there's more good. Believe me, because God's involved. There's more good in all of this than bad. So I want to make sure I stress that. Let me see. They're using the same tactics, as I said, and it's just a different face. The face of Baptist, the face of Luther, and the face of... You get my point. Now, how is church history repeating itself, though? How is it repeating itself? I'm going to give an example of something that literally grossed me out. Okay? It kind of angered me, and I'm not going to mention names this time. Normally, because a lot of people, I also post these videos, not just on YouTube, but also on Facebook. And a lot of people know this gentleman who I'm going to talk about, and a little bit of his story. And we're talking just a few months ago this happened, so it's fairly recent of how, as an example, how history repeats itself. Now, he was told by a clerical person, okay, that he is associated with. He was told that when my friend would bring up some of these leaven issues, okay, and we're just trying to expose the leaven, the little bit of leaven that has leavened the loaf in Christianity and in our Bibles. When he was trying to bring this out, okay, this person laid down some standards. This clergy said, we must study responsibly. Now, this is how he defined studying responsibly, is you can't use any history, you can't use wiki, and you can only use the Latin Vulgate translated Bibles. My viewers, are you catching this? Okay? This same kind of preacher would scream from his pulpit, context, context, context. That's all they would scream that. You must read and understand and study in context. Folks, history and culture and research, that is context. Okay? Pointing out that the Latin Vulgate Bible has been grossly perverted. Latin Vulgate Bibles that our Bibles have come out of have been grossly mistranslated and perverted, that leaven. Okay, that is context. Well, the last thing I'm going to share or say is, if you're in a church like that, folks, don't just politely leave. Run from that place. Signing off.